honored to have you here. I call it Di or DiAnns. I'm just kidding. Di, I think it was, let me get a date here.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I'm going to scare you with a date. Mobile World Congress. It was 2011. After a evening presentation or something, and then it was dancing all night long. But it's been a long time.
As happens at Mobile World Congress, yes.
So everybody knows I've been trying or hoping to get Di here for a while, and finally the stars were aligned. So thank you.
So kind. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So thinking about kind of starting off in the past, and then we're going to talk about the present and what we think about the future. So in the early days, you were head of growth at Waze, and when we first met. So tell us a little bit of what it was like in the early days and what the vision was there and what actually, did it all come together as planned, or, a fun story that was a surprise?
No startup ever goes according to plan.
Right. So what was the plan right when then?
All right, so what was the plan? When I first met the CEO of Waze, it was 2009, and it was primarily just an idea. And it was an app that had started as a way to, he was basically hacking the Palm Pilot and using this map.
How many people remember the Palm Pilot?
Wow. This is an older crowd then, I just want to say. We're all in good company here.
Exactly.
So this was in 2007, they started hacking the Palm Pilot. They downloaded the map at that time, and it was completely inaccurate. They wanted to add more data to it, so they started doing it. They were manually merging the updates, re-uploading it, this really crappy SDK, and they got a cease and desist letter. And so they said, okay, well, we'll just do it ourselves. Israel is a small country. We can do this. And so it started really as a very early kind of crowdsourcing. Let's just all put what we know together on this map. And then when I met them, we were really starting to think through, well, if you can get everybody using it in their cars, then they become like probes. They can be more engaged in what's happening, and we can really get an entire road grid. And that's what we started doing. And it's funny.
Sorry to interrupt. Since you met him, and how did you decide to join, or and how did you decide that this is the project you were going to collaborate with?
Do you know this story actually?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. He tricked me, which is a very good Israeli CEO tactic that I have since adopted. But I was CEO of a company called Placial, which was a very early social map company, one that was my first startup, and it was very cool. Millions of people making maps of things that were important to them. Financially, it was completely not viable, and I wasn't making any money. So Noam, the CEO, said, come to Israel. I'm going to give you X dollars. And I was like, oh, thank God, that's like my rent for the next few months. So I went there to give that talk, and then all of his investors were around the table. It was only a staff of 5, but they were all there. And I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. They care so much about social mapping. Of course, they didn't. It was an attempt to hire me. But I ended up leaving that trip to Israel, resigning as CEO of my own company, and joining Waze to start the U.S. office.
On the trip, even before you left?
On the spot. And it was an amazing, so he already had it planned. I mean, he had the offer ready. It was a whole thing. And he said, it was an amazing offer too, by the way. But he said, but it expires when you get on the plane.
Oh, really?
I love that. So good. And I was naive at the time, so. But I remember being in the taxi on the way back to the airport thinking, I don't even have phone numbers for these people. I don't know how to get in touch with them. I don't know who they are. And now they're my colleagues, and I've just resigned as CEO of my own company. Never looked back. This is the thing about following your intuition, though, as well. But I also knew, this idea that they had a very good idea around location-based advertising as the future, but a stopgap of licensing data in the meantime. It was also very rational compared to what I was used to, and I loved it.
That's great. That's a great story.
Yeah.
And so
I just left a year and a half ago. I was there for the whole.
So tell us more about the. Start anyway. So give me some of that. Like what, as growth, I mean, it grew.
So there was no, like now growth is an obvious thing, right? At that time, it was platform, it was distribution. At a certain moment, I took over analytics and it became more about growth. But we all take growth for granted now, right? Like there are very nice data analytics platforms. We know the things to measure. We all know our churn before we even have any users somehow. But in those days, it was pretty difficult to kind of pull all of those things together.
Yeah, the tools weren't there.
The tools weren't there. We had to build a lot ourselves. And, I guess some of the early versions were, we had raised our Series A, and, you get used to every time you launch a new feature, you launch something else, it's like this trampoline, and you become addicted to these new numbers that really don't have anything to do with engagement or usage. They just have to do with new users. And it's a good way to start learning, but it doesn't mean anything about the success of your business or your app. So when we finally got our first churn numbers, we realized that it was horrible. Like we were getting lots of users in, but nobody was sticking around.
Roughly lots. When you say lots in those days.
This is 2010. I don't even remember.
Like tens, hundreds a day, thousands a day. It was just Israel still back then.
No. We launched in California first. And then started rolling out. By 2010, we were all over the U.S., but I do remember in 2010, we only had like 100,000 users in L.A., for example, because I'll tell you a story about that after.
Okay.
So we were still fairly small, but no one was sticking around. We had to make the very difficult decision of stopping production, spending a lot of time with users, understanding why they were leaving, why they weren't staying. I mean, it's obvious in retrospect it was a really shitty looking thing that didn't work very well and had terrible performance, but we had to learn this at the time.
One of the many reasons why I love Di.
So we didn't launch anything for 4 months. And we were starting to raise our Series B. And you see your numbers just doing this, and then you suck it up and you're like, well, all right, well, we know this is the right thing to do. And then we had, so we came out with basically a relaunch of the app that made a lot more sense to the people that we were aspiring to use. It was more engaging. This was when we were doing the PacMan thing, if anybody remembers.
Who remembers the PacMan on Waze? Or tell them what that was all about, because that was great.
So the PacMan thing was early version of gamification. If you were on a road that nobody had driven down before to validate, it was still these pellets. And your car turned into this little PacMan guy. It was called I can't remember, road muncher or something, because we also got a cease and desist on using PacMan. But okay, so, and you got points for every pellet that you ate. And then what you did was you validated the road. So for the next person it would come. And then we needed to know if you can take a right, take a left, how do you make this map navigable? So we would put these road goodies on the corners, and then we would learn, okay, you can take a right here, you can't take a left there.
I actually remember driving and going different ways to try to get more pellets.
Yeah, people fell in love doing this kind of stuff. It's. You
mean actual relationships?
No, like people went on dates. They went on dates to chomp these.
Come on, really?
Yeah, it's a thing. Yeah. It was a thing. It no longer exists.
Okay, so you did that.
So we did that. We made it a lot more engaging, and then our retention numbers went through the roof, and we were able to barely close our Series B, and it was fine. But it was one of those painful things where you need to do the right thing, and it's how you balance the external pressures you're getting from investors or users with the internal knowledge of the right thing to do.
So how do you know the right thing? Was there a couple different solutions?
Well, the numbers
was there
tell
Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and others that were like? Were there other game ideas? Or how did you choose Pac-Man, and why did that work?
It was just, how to make it a fun experience. Because if you are, look, at the end of the day, we were a navigation app that was not very good. We were a traffic app that didn't have a lot of data and relied on crowdsourcing. So you have to make it fun, right? And because it was such an interesting use of the app platform, we were, promoted on the App Store and on the Google Play Store. And it was, that helped us get a lot of attention. I feel like that was the first time I was on the Today Show was because of that. And it was great that the users started sticking around. So anyway, growth was, at that time, not just putting levers and all kinds of wonderful platforms for A/B testing. It was like for the first time realizing that nobody actually sticks around, and what are you going to do about that? And then it turned into a whole bunch of other things on the distribution side. Something a bit related to video. is that we got a call, and this was late 2010. And as I mentioned, in LA, we only had like 100,000 drivers. And it was from ABC7. There was something called Carmageddon that was happening in Los Angeles, which was a 10-mile stretch of the 405 that was going to be shut down. And so 350,000 cars were going to be displaced. And they said, can you come to the studio? We got to the studio, and that's when we realized for the first time that you could, hook up an iPad to a green screen. They stuck us in the traffic reporter chairs, and we were reporting traffic from Waze based on all of the real-time detours that people were taking so that they could figure out what people were doing. And that was kind of a game changer for us. One fun story about why they put us on air, because they're very skeptical, especially in those days. One of the reports...
Skeptical of what?
User data. Or crowdsourced information.
Right, okay.
I think now we're all much cooler with it, but in 2010 it was still kind of a thing that journalists didn't feel very comfortable with. So one of the reports that came in was sofa on the road. And, the GM, who's amazing, said, DiAnns, I don't really think that this is real. I was like, I don't know. How do I know? I'm not over there. She said, let me send a helicopter. So she sent a traffic copter, and there was a sofa on the road. And she said, okay, go on the air, go. All right, I trust you. They had no other way to determine if there was a sofa in the middle of the road.
They actually fact-checked the sofa.
They did.
With a helicopter.
With a helicopter, they did.
I wish I could have a helicopter fact-check things.
What's cool, though, is today, 300 TVs... Actually, we could do that.
You got connections?
Today, Waze is on 300 TV stations around the world.
So talk about that video
data.
And visual tech, and in there is a bunch of interesting. Let me rephrase this. So you went from a very basic platform to many more layers of PacMans and others, and layers of visual tech and or broadcast of the platform. So where are the pieces of that visual tech in Waze? In your mind?
I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to the map layers and how you're able to put all of these different data streams onto it. I think one of the most exciting things for me, though, is what do you do with all of this? And so in around 2014, after the acquisition, we started putting our traffic data into the traffic operations center monitors in a couple of cities. I think Rio was the first one, to really get a sense of how do you visualize all of these different pieces of information and what do you do with it. So we worked with a number of cities to figure out how to take that, and we used that because of those visualizations to improve emergency response times by a significant amount. We're now used by most of the 911 centers in the US and in Europe. We used it to decrease congestion, to verify traffic policies, to improve and optimize waste management, pickup, drop-offs, this kind of thing. So it was useful in many ways, and then it grew to a program of 800 cities. But it was, I would say, not exactly visual tech, but that data visualization component was a game changer in terms of using this 100 million drivers information, no PII, to actually affect change in their cities.
That's great. I mean, it's definitely from visual tech standpoint, it wasn't deep computer vision or other things, but the visualization of data is very hard to do well, and pieces of the puzzle. And so, Waze is part of the journey from flat maps actually to many layers. And we also, as you know, we invested in Mapillary very early, which is another part of the layers of the mapping platform. So just before the acquisition, growth is taking off. Give us a story, a behind-the-scenes story of what it was like, and what was the biggest challenge just prior to the acquisition.
You realize this feels like a million years ago.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
We'll get to presentation.
The biggest challenge prior to the acquisition. This has nothing to do with the acquisition. This has to do with organizing probably the disparate teams around the world. So we had a headquarters in Palo Alto, where I'm based, and there was a headquarters in Israel, and then we were opening this office in New York. And we in those early days, at the acquisition, we were only 110 people, by the way. But for most of the time I was there, we were 30, 40 people, and it's very easy to get things done with no process. And then, trying to figure out, so then what happens is, as you hire more people, you start to slow down right at the time that we were going through the acquisition. And our plan was not to sell. We were closing on a $250 million round of financing at that time. And in the Valley, people smell that stuff. And I've thought back, I don't think we did anything to lead people on. Well, it smells like money, is what it smells like. Yeah, so.
Good answer.
Yeah. So then those conversations opened, but the plan was to, really, raise a lot of money
Sure.
and try to do this independently. And then the Google thing came along, and it was just a great opportunity to scale. But we were already struggling with trying to operationalize at scale a lot of the things that we were doing. And so it was really good timing to come into Google. We do process very well at Google. Yeah.
So after that, there's a couple initiatives which will lead us right into present day, kind of urban cities initiatives. And it was, what is it called? It was a lot, at Google, there was a separate group that you were a part of or running that related to kind of some urban initiatives.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So about a year and a half ago, I left Waze because I was super into this Connected Citizens Program stuff, the 800 cities, and it was shocking that how much they could do with so little data and so little analytics. And with such little support, what an impact we had. So I started a lab at Google on urban systems that took a lot of those experimentation frameworks that we had been using around traffic data and tried to expand them to other kinds of things.
Such as?
I don't. It's not really things I can.
Okay,
Thanks.
we won't talk about it.
Yeah, broader stuff. Broader stuff than just traffic.
Okay,
Yes.
And so that leads us to exciting new role that you announced about a month ago, or a little 2 months ago, at the We company, WeWork, and I love the title that you have, and you say it, CWeO.
I know. It's a very WeWork, a very We company specific
Do you use
title.
that? Is that on your business card?
No, I don't have business cards. I haven't in like 10
Will
years.
you ever have business cards?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
I don't either.
Why would you use that
I
paper?
don't know. Exactly. It's
I
a
care
waste.
about the
I don't want to carry it either.
No.
You got to put
Anyway.
it somewhere. You got to write it down. Just email me.
It's the most hilarious title I've ever had.
I laugh every time I think about it or say it.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Good.
Yeah.
You deserve. You deserve better than that. But it's a funny title.
It's a funny
Do
title.
they use that internally? Actually,
So there are four of us.
4 CWEOs.
There are 4 CWEOs, and yeah, I know. It sounds like we're the wee ones, right? Like we're the wee little CEOs, the mini CEOs or something. I don't know, whatever. It's they had them before I came. So really, what they are, they're the core regional leads at the company. So there's the one for Latin America. There's one for EMEA and APAC. There's a couple, and then I'm the 4th. And I came in to found the new cities division. And I just started there 3 months ago. It's a completely new group within the company. There's folks from my lab at Google there. There is architect from Studio Drawer, and his team came over. And he was really recognized as someone who did urban development with and kind of from nature and natural materials. So it's a really challenging but nice holistic view of what is the right role for the We company to play in urban development? And it has to be some technology, it has to be some nature, but and some design and some built environment. But at the end of the day, it all has to be in service of the community. And I think that's a lot of what's gotten lost in all of this hype around smart cities. And IBM started this 10 years ago with Smart Planet, and we really haven't gone. We haven't
gotten much smarter.
We haven't gotten much smarter.
No.
Well, it's because we didn't recognize that the humans are the smart part in all of this. And so how do we put tools in the hands of people? How do we create places, co-create places and built environments that really allow people to flourish? And in order to do that, you have to deal with some pretty major issues related to inequitability and economic development and the way that happens in our neighborhoods and cities today. You have to deal with some sustainability issues. You have to deal with some technical issues. There's just, it's a kind of a grab bag of things we need to figure out. But the core for WeWork before the We company was really physical space, services, and community. And those were the building blocks that got us to, really kind of reinvent what it means to go to work and where to go to work and how you get to work and, to really make a better experience and to really try to help startups and small businesses fare better in the long run.
And the
so how do you take those building blocks now outside of the workspace and into our mobility systems, into our built environment, into other places in the city? And that's what we're sifting through right now.
And so when you mentioned earlier the three pieces of WeWork, and the community part was a big part, Meetup was a big part of that, which you were also on the board and involved in. So it almost seems like you're coming at it with expertise from many different areas and a perfect fit for this new role.
So I have been doing so many weird things in the last 10 years, like the Urban Systems Lab, and I was doing some real estate development. I'm a venture partner at Obvious Ventures. I was on the board of Meetup. So really, really out of this love for the city and love for things that easy wins that we can have, I was really felt like in a way I was studying it from all of these different angles. And then Adam comes along and tells me I'm thinking too small, and why don't I go to a real company where I can have a big enough platform to put all of these things together. That's, I'm being facetious, but that is kind of his, he's a very bold guy. And I love it. That's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing those things together. The We Company acquired Meetup about a year before I joined. I was on the board of Meetup. And Scott is just, for those of you who know him, is community at its core, is service at its core. And now he's actually working with our team. So we have phenomenally good minds trying to keep us honest, keep us real, keep us thinking about this mission of we and not, let's face it, nobody wants to live in some kind of we branded city, right? Or any company branded city. We need to be thinking about platforms and how do you stay honest and stay humble in that? Because one of the biggest problems with any of these, centralized or top-down structures, whether it's architects or whether it's, NEOM in Saudi Arabia or whether all these new cities, it's really been very traditional in this kind of top-down master planned approach, and that's one thing we can't do. So we gotta keep each other honest.
That's it. I love the ambition. So give us a couple. If you can give us a little nuggets that you can, obviously, because you're still working on the plans and what you're doing. But what are some tangible examples, if you can share? If not, we can move on to the next questions.
Well, when I'm on the spot, I feel I need to share something.
I'd like that answer.
Yeah, so I'll share two things that are still a bit vague.
Okay.
One is if you guys have ever been part of an urban planning process, then you know that the biggest innovation in co-creation is let's have a workshop, let's invite the community, and let's make buildings out of popsicle sticks. Then we will go away, and then every few months we'll have the community come back in and we'll see how we're doing against our goals. So I given that that's the current state of things, I will say that we are looking at ways to have an ongoing lab that will allow us to understand what are their true needs in a city, how do we measure them, in a very small kind of lab-like environment, and make sure that we're able to respond to them, because we want to be excellent at this notion of co-creation. Still vague, but it's better than cities division.
We're digging in a little more. Yeah,
okay.
That's good.
Second thing, opportunity zones. 8,000 or so of these in the United States, primarily in underserved areas, and they have a new regulation that allows for kind of a capital gains vacation for cap gain taxes as a way to motivate people to come in and invest in these neighborhoods. The problem with this, and it's very well intended, as a lot of policy. The potential consequence on the negative side is becoming a gentrification accelerator. And this I find terrifying, because I think one of the underlying true problems we have in our society, and by the way, most cities around the world, is the income inequality, ownership inequality, all of this. So I think it's really important to start looking at mechanisms for keeping some or putting some ownership, fractional ownership, in the hands of locals as people are coming in. So I'll leave it at that. That's another thing that I'm thinking about, and that was when I started 3 months ago, not even in the agenda.
Cool. I remember we took a walk shortly after you started, and it was still a very, big picture. One of the things sounds like it also ties very closely that I know is near and dear to your heart is the Neighborhood Start Fund. I mean, how is that going? I remember going out to one of the startup presentations out in Bronx
it was in Brownsville.
Brownsville.
Yeah.
How is that going?
It's going well. We're pivoting right now. So
tell everybody what you started.
So I started a Microfund with Lupe Fiasco a few years ago. It was like a small $1 million fund, idea stage companies in the hood. So we're in 9 neighborhoods, and we're in neighborhoods that are super dynamic and creative, a lot going on, and just very little access to capital, access to mentors, access to all the different kinds of resources that entrepreneurs need to be successful. And so he and I started very small tickets early on there. We have a cohort of we have 7 companies in the portfolio now. And part of the reason we didn't scale it is because it really took us a while to understand what was needed. And it took much longer than my 6-month plan to get to prototype, because we were still dealing with issues like, my phone got cut off, so I couldn't make the meeting, or, prepping people for investor meetings in Silicon Valley, and just this whole other level of thing. And so we're actually relaunching. We've taken everything we've learned and made these like bite-sized courses that you will go through, and that we can open it up to all of these entrepreneurs everywhere. And we're working with a couple of investment banks that have just given us money to kind of go to that next step. So it's going, but I wish I had more time to dedicate to it.
Questions in the audience, and I've got more questions, but I just want to give it out there. Raise your hands right in the middle.
Thank you. Love hearing the story. I just thought this is more in the way of an observation than a question. I met the mayor of Mountain View recently, and he was telling me what a problem it's become with the fact that, led by Google but many others, the large companies move in and they try to disincentivize their employees from ever going outside the campus. And what that has done is, really become a problem for all of the local businesses that make up the community, because in theory there should be, every day hundreds of thousands of people coming in, but they are not becoming clients for those businesses. So anything that you can do to address that is awesome.
First of all, that is an incredibly astute observation. And one of the things I love most and will continue being an advocate for is this kind of inside-out campus. Because we are more in the cities than in the suburban campuses, it's not as hard for us to say, you know what, we're not putting cafeterias, we're not putting massage parlors, we're not putting hair, you're not going to get your hair cut there, you have to go out into the city, and that is already doing so much good for promoting the local businesses that are in the area. And that was even before my time. We just submitted an economic impact report about direct and indirect money that's going back out into the community. And I'm a huge advocate for getting these campuses to open up. And even if you're in a suburban area, allow for around these corporate centers to support local businesses. And that's definitely something that's on the agenda. It's so easy to do. And it's like a huge cost savings, too, for companies who aren't going to provide all of these perks.
That's right. Any other questions? Over there.
Hi. Does it work? Yes. I'm Ayelet from Touchcast. I'm leading the education and research there. So I have 2 questions, but I'll see if we have time for both. The first question is related to WeGrow, and if at your role, how is that integrated into the urban cities plan? And I'm thinking more of involvement of the school in the community and so on. If you can expand on that, if there's any planning that's related to WeGrow. And the second question is related to gentrification, and how are you thinking about that kind of, I would say, problem, or balancing some of that process that's happening in so many neighborhoods?
Thank you. So WeGrow, for anyone who doesn't know, is the school. And it's really for young kids right now, and I believe there's only one or two. It's still, I guess, what you would call an incubation mode. And quite honestly, I don't have a connection to that at the moment. I think a lot about weaving education into some of these like mixed use notions of what should happen in a city and how to access them. But what I'm doing, you can think of it more like the connective tissue between the pieces than going very, very deep in any one of them. But the educational side, we also have the Flatiron School now. I'm very excited about trades and apprenticeships and upskilling and retraining. So I feel like there's an entire area of supporting cities that extends from WeGrow all the way to upskilling. And, as the We Company evolves, I will be able to incorporate them more into our strategy. In terms of the gentrification topic, I'll go back to what I said before. This has to be a financial services, financial product mechanism that developers adopt and potentially is regulated. But really, we're talking about finance products here, financial services products. That's I believe the only way to go and the only way to set an expectation that developers need to act a certain way when they go into a neighborhood. You need to make it financially viable for them and then maybe a little bit of shame into showing what it can be like.
Cool. Are you still doing angel investing in your copious spare time?
I'm not new ones. I
Okay.
have like 50 investments right now, and it's so hard to keep track. I mean, once in a while, I'll fall in love with something. Who is it saying that they fall in love with products? Somebody was saying you fall in love with products. Was it you? Yes, Jillian. I fall in love with products. So right now, I'm like trying not to meet with anybody lest I fall in love with their products. But yeah.
And so just, what are very short, because we're almost running out of time, but just a couple kind of comments of what type of products and people excites you the most, and which ones turn you off the most?
So, while I believe that technology has to be something that's in service of community and on its own, it's not enough if it's not solving a problem. I do have a big love of deep tech. It is, something I'm incredibly passionate about. Recent investments are across the ecosystem in AI. I'm really excited about processing at the edge. I'm really excited about federated learning models. These are areas that at the moment excite me a lot. So that's what I'm doing now. I have in the past invested in a lot of mobility, autonomous cars, that kind of thing.
And the type of entrepreneurs, the type
By the
of
way,
people.
construction tech too is super fun right now. Like all these robots who are framing and painting, and they're doing all of this stuff, but then figuring out how to get the trades interested in adopting and working with these new technologies. I'm super stoked on construction tech.
Cool.
Yeah.
And which ones don't you like? Or it's also not, I guess I ask it a different way, and I always ask it in the fireside chats. What is your, in one word answers, what's the favorite personality trait of an entrepreneur, and what's your least favorite personality trait of an entrepreneur? In one word answers. And hopefully I frequently do this because it kind of reminds people in a very succinct way, how things can move the needle in either direction. Right.
So there's a few. Okay, so what I love on entrepreneurs, rigorous innovation.
Okay.
Least favored, arrogance.
Arrogance.
I will not invest in a shitty entrepreneur.
An arrogant, shitty entrepreneur.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and the one sentence of advice to everybody that's building a business. I'm not going to make it easy on you.
Like one sentence.
One
It's
sentence.
like, I mean,
One
we
sentence.
spend, I've spent, so many years doing this, and so have you guys. There's no simple answers. How about that? There are no one sentence pieces of advice for you.
All right. Thank you very much, Di, for coming. You've been fantastic.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.